as a conversation, perhaps, than a lecture. So please don't hesitate to interrupt and ask a question or ask me to talk about something that I didn't touch on. What I'd like to talk about, especially since MIT's program is probably the oldest one in the country, and by oldest I mean it began in the fall of 1969, which now seems like eons ago. And in fact, it began, if you cast your mind back to that long distant time, it began at a time when students were rising up in a way that's hard to think about today. We worry about student passivity in some cases. This is a time when it was considered even perhaps dangerous to take students into your lab, because what could you possibly be inviting? Actually, it was really a time for faculty and students to, in a way, make peace and work on something together that they had never shared before. There are a lot of writings around that period where you remember, some of you might remember, students being described as they, and faculty was some distant group that was probably, if not with the students, they were in opposition to the students. There wasn't any meeting of the minds. And so it was really quite I don't know, courageous is quite the right word, but it was certainly a fairly daring thing to do, to ask faculty to consider opening their doors wide to students, right across the board, no questions asked. And in that first year, about 300 students walked through those doors. Many of them in the beginning, as a matter of fact, were in areas like chemistry, because that was the easiest thing to conceive of. Oh yes, a lab. Well, this is where students probably worked before, so why not? And in those very early days, we, not including me, in those early days, gave students, or in a way it was a gift to their faculty. We funded these students about $100 apiece for materials and services, and in actuality, that was to offset what was assumed to be the cost that student cost the lab. In other words, if you invite a student in, well, they will use up chemicals, they will take up space, and they might break something. So $100, admittedly even $100 seems like far too paltry an amount. In 1969 and 1970, 1971, it wasn't seen as that small amount of money. And this way, the faculty member would be taking a student who at least would not cost him or her anything. They would, at the very worst, break even. Needless to say, after a couple of years, the faculty began to pay, $100 to pay the student. If the student wants a stipend, why not pay it to them? We don't really need $100 to offset the cost, because amazingly they were competing. By about 1973, I think it was, students first began to actually get paid stipends for their work. But as you can see, the program began before stipends began, so credit was actually the currency. When students worked, they got academic credit. In the very beginning, and I'm talking about the very beginning in a way because all these things are still true now, they're embedded in the program. The program was open immediately to everybody. Every student, freshman, junior, sophomore, senior, it made no difference. They could begin any time of year, September, October, November, December, it made no difference at all. They could begin at any time, and the credit would be flexible to reflect that, because it was begun, you might imagine, by somebody who knew what research was all about and knew it didn't begin on a certain date and end on a certain date. So it had to be flexible. The reward also had to be flexible. So stipends were always different from one another. The amounts of credit students earned was always different. It was to be worked out between the student and the faculty member. And in order to do that, departments right across the institute set up something called UR credits, undergraduate research credits, and given the names, the numbers rather of the departments, 1 UR, 2 UR, and so on. And every department could do this a little bit differently how they liked. Now this whole concept of drop, to go back still a little bit further, derived from the kind of an atmosphere and discussion, but also from a lecture given by E.H. Lamb, the founder of Polaroid Corporation, who some years after this lecture gave MIT some money for educational innovation, which I think put the administration in a position where do it now or lose the money. You've got to do something. The idea then was to, in his words, usher every student of every kind of background into some kind of research experience as soon as possible. The idea being, if you get them involved early, they won't yet know that what can be done and what can't be done. They'll be naive enough to ask questions that older, more learned students will think are naive questions. They're not afraid to do the impossible because they don't know what the impossible is. And this is something that Heather was talking a little bit about. So that was all in people's minds right from the very start. So with that background, the very worst, I think, that faculty in the beginning stages of MIT's Europe program would have had to say about it was that, what's the big deal? Some students always did research anyway, so I don't see the point of having a program. So that was the worst sin you could possibly commit. The other one might possibly be, well, students won't contribute anything, but at the same time they had to admit there wasn't much of a risk to be taken. $100 to offset breakage or something in chemistry, that's not much of a risk. And in other departments it seemed, well, if it didn't work out, you could let the student go, so there was nothing to be lost. So with that sort of attitude, potentially not much to be gained, but on the other hand, not very much to be lost. The ground was laid for very bright students to make a mark. Nothing else could possibly happen. I mean, the results, in other words, were there, evident to people who could see, I think, right from the beginning. The person really in charge of setting this program in motion back then had the foresight to see that the best thing to get something going was to have people jump on a bandwagon. And the best way to create a bandwagon was to let people know what was going on. And so students in the early 70s were asked to present their research, usually in small little groups in the very beginning, to administrators, especially those who didn't think there was anything much going on. And people being what they are, they were awed, they were stunned, they thought this was exciting and wonderful because this was exactly what they wanted to see accomplished. Even people maybe who didn't take much of an interest, one would think, in students. They also had an abstract idea of what education should be about at the very worst. And so this was all a very rewarding kind of experience. So students got a bit of a profile on campus. The bandwagon effect did happen because if there was nothing lost and Department X seemed to be doing it, and they got something out of it, then for Department Y to participate with me and Department Y kind of got left out. They had nothing to brag about. They had no students to put up on the platform when alumni came by. They had no one to show off, and so, well, why not? And so I would say gradually, but it wasn't really all that gradually. I think the numbers sped up pretty quickly. They reached over 1,000 in pretty short order. Now we're talking about, and right now probably today, about 2,500 students out of a population of 4,000 are probably doing research right now as I speak. And of those, probably 80% are doing this for pay. In the summertime, last summer, there were about 1,200 working full-time, which is 40 hours a week all summer. That's as of now. Before I tell you about some of the questions that we're facing, I do want to tell you a few more of the, I guess you could call it the structure of the program. It doesn't have a lot of formal, visible structure. In fact, it has very little discernible, visible structure, which in many ways has been key to its success because it doesn't look bureaucratic. There's nothing to see out there. Everyone knows, by this point, everybody knows it exists. It's quite key in the message that admissions people give to would-be applicants for MIT. Most faculty know about it. New faculty who come to MIT at this point, the wise ones look for a Europe student right away before they have a graduate student, before they have much money. They know that MIT Europe is a resource to get them started. So the word is long since out. The days when it was something we had to work on, I think, are in the past. But I did want to mention something about the structure of the program that I said isn't all that visible. At least I hope it's not all that visible. Heather can tell me if she sees some big structure out there that I'm missing. What the student does in the beginning is find a project by visiting faculty, just as Heather explained. That's a very typical kind of beginning. Some faculty advertise particular projects, which suggests that they've just recently got some funding and they have some people they want to plug into something. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. Probably 10% of the faculty actually advertise their projects. The rest will assume that people like Heather are going to come knocking at your door. They're going to perhaps select students from classes or whatever, or just wait and see what happens. When a student's gotten the project, the expectation is that that project, whether it be for pay or for credit or a third mode exists, which is quite legitimate as an official volunteer, the student is expected to write a proposal. You can call it a letter of intent if it's not a proposal asking for funding. And the standards that are applied to that are precisely the same. They should be precisely the same whether that project is for credit, pay, or volunteer. Now, again, Heather can tell you that there's some faculty that she knows who prefer one mode, absolutely, because students may work better when they work for pay. Other faculty insist that students working at least the first semester work for credit, and maybe next semester if things work out, they can request pay or get paid from their research grant or whatever. The other important piece of structure is that having registered for credit or gotten funding, that aside, at the end of every semester, regardless of when the person started, whether they've been working for 3 months, 2, or 1, the student has to independently write us a letter, an informal letter, can be a report with a note attached. These days it's more often email, telling us how that experience went. And that might just be something like, I had kind of an interesting project, my faculty supervisor paid no attention to me, this was a terrible experience, I would never do it again. It can be that's an evaluation. It can be a lengthy report of all the students' successes, a technical report included, in wonderful words. It doesn't matter what it is, we want to know about it. We want it to be candid. If they're bad words, if they're kind of bad words that are just one of those things that happens, well, it happens. And it gets written off, better luck next time. Maybe you need to look more carefully for a project. Maybe that wasn't the right field. Maybe you should have asked more questions. Sometimes there's a problem that has to be looked into. Sometimes it means that faculty supervisor should be avoided until that person understands how they should be dealing with students who will fund that project next time around until that's happened.
Yeah. Do you give feedback directly to the faculty when that happens?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, well, it's the simplest course imaginable. We'll call them up, send them a note, and say, look, we heard that there was a problem. Tell us your side of the story. Usually, these things, oh yes, we're going to know this. Well, sometimes these things are really are more complicated. Sometimes they're very simple. Sometimes people haven't realized that the student felt overlooked because the student never said, and it never occurred to them.
What if other issues the students may have come up in the course of the evaluation? I think in terms of something like sexual harassment.
Oh, you betcha. In 25 years, you can be sure you name an issue and it has happened. There was just an issue about, I think it was last year, in a particular lab where complaints came from a single lab. Some of the complaints were sort of bland. It was a little hard to penetrate what someone was getting at. So we talked to the students, and it looked as if it was a mixture of being treated like a really low person on the totem pole in an unpleasant way. And you are that in a way, but to be treated that is something else again. And the women, it seemed that they were, I think, almost all women who had felt they were not treated well. They were, I don't know about not necessarily harassment, but it kind of felt like it. And what was done there is that was brought to the attention of the faculty coordinator. Every academic department and interdisciplinary laboratory has a faculty person who serves as our on-the-spot person, our coordinator. It was brought to that person's attention. And what they did is they convened a meeting with the people involved, and it became a departmental problem, and they dealt with it.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the coordinator that's contributing? What's the role?
Okay, the coordinator is the person who is responsible for upholding the departmental standards as far as your office is concerned. They would sign off on every draft proposal and hold on to every letter of intent. And it's their business at the end of the semester to see that faculty submit grades, which are generally pass-fail for your up. They can be letter grades on request. Again, speaking of grading, so I don't forget to mention this, I should throw in now the fact that beginning of the fall, we're going to be able to have on student transcripts a notation of drops done for pay. Faculty have always felt that this should be done because it underscores the fact that drops for pay are worth academic credit. What it will be is no units on associated with the credit, but it'll be a credit-worthy activity noted on the transcript.
Will that be retroactive?
Pardon?
Will that be are mine going to show up?
Oh,
when I'm
it's
asking?
a question. No, it's not going to be retroactive. Just beginning then.
Is the same pattern for coordinator faculty members?
Yeah, coordinator is always a faculty member. Well, almost 99.9% of faculty member. There's one lab that for some reason or another has always traditionally had someone who's not a faculty member. If there's a problem there, we would go to the head of the laboratory.
What about in non-science?
Absolutely the same. I haven't really stressed that, but there's no distinguishing between a drop in, let's say, poetry. There have been two, I think, actually. There's no distinguishing between drops in any of the humanities and drops in science or engineering. They tend to be defined differently by the disciplines themselves, in that if you did a drop in literature, it is much more likely to resemble in many ways what someone else would label independent study. The label doesn't concern us. The point is it is a creative investigation of some sort, and that would involve the theater project here is an excellent example of something that would be, it probably has been done at MIT as a drama project. And I have to say that there are a lot of drops in the social sciences and the humanities. In fact, we really played Robin Hood, giving professors like Heather Wages, Professor Stephen Lippert, a rather tough time in getting funding from him for his students, so that we can save our own drop dollars to give to social science and humanities projects which have no funding. And in fact, at MIT, there are no graduate students in the humanities, so there's no question about the kind of funding, unless somebody has an endowed chair or has some other pocket they can reach into for funding. We always ask, you never know, sometimes there's something. But the same standards apply right across the board, and the majority of your activity, as you would expect, is in the largest departments, which are in engineering. And the largest number, I think, of student-initiated projects, interestingly, I think, is both in humanities and in mechanical engineering. If I had to just pick some as an example, and in mechanical engineering, it's because that's where the inventor would go if they invented a new pedaling mechanism for a bicycle, let's say. If they have this idea, what they have to then do is convince a faculty member that working on this would be worth academic credit. In other words, it would be enough of a learning experience involved in doing this that it would be worth mechanical engineering academic credit. And likewise with a project in, let's say, music or anything else. Let's see, what other points did I want to hit on here? A lot of it has been said of working with teams. I would say a lot of that happens at MIT, a lot of that doesn't happen at MIT. It depends, I think, on the discipline, on the kind of project somebody's doing. There's a lot of teamwork, kind of project work done in astronautics and aeronautics. That department works that way. There's a lot of that done in chemical engineering because the labs are very large, they're very hierarchical, there are lots of groups there to work with. In some areas, working independently is also valued, and that's fine too. So I think there's a full spectrum of every kind of work going on. I want to touch on one other thing to help get beginners a kind of a leg up. There was a program I started 2 years ago called a mentor program in January, which teams up upper class drop students, in other words, more experienced drop students, whatever year they might be, with a beginner, usually a freshman, who will work with them for maybe 10 hours a week for roughly 3 weeks during this independent activities period during January when there are no classes, but where research usually goes on, and get that student kind of initiated in how a lab works, what the equipment is, what the protocols of the lab are, and giving them a feeling, in other words, for what research experience is like. And And for that, the Europe student, the experienced Europer, gets $100 honorarium and from us. And the beginner gets nothing actually except perhaps an invitation into the project that they've been working on. And perhaps guaranteed funding from us. I say perhaps because there's no more guarantees on funding at all at MIT any longer. But they'll get a good shot at it. First year of this work, we had a much smaller group of mentors than we would have liked, but an endless group of, I don't know, what do you call them, mentees? We couldn't accommodate everybody, but everybody who did get in the program was invited to join the research project, which I think says a lot for getting that extra bit of help and getting a chance to be looked over by a faculty member, so that they know by the time they take you on, you're not a completely raw beginner.
I have a question. Given that MIT doesn't have what we call PhD lines here, and everyone essentially funds a graduate student through their departments, or they're funded through the department, not that it comes from the actual pool of money from the university. And you have already a reward system for what you call the sort of mentors. I know that she spoke about postdocs. Are they rewarded in any way whatsoever, or
Only in getting the extra pair of hands.
okay?
The reward for faculty is exactly as Heather said it, the extra pair of hands and the real contribution to their work, equivalent to and sometimes even surpassing a graduate student. The risk is it doesn't happen. Sometimes I suppose it could be a negative effect on the work, but the risk is usually that it doesn't happen. I should mention something about finances. We currently get the majority of our funding on Europe dollars, what we call our own money that we use as we please, and especially use for funds for projects that have no other sources of funding. We get the majority of that from MIT Institute of General Funds. Now, the College Work Study connection is an interesting one. Instead of students who are eligible for college work study at MIT, are dealt with in a different way with the financial aid office and many other places. If they're eligible for financial aid, once their name is recognized on the student payroll, instead of faculty being reimbursed or the libraries or anybody being reimbursed that percentage from college work study funds, that percentage of money gets put into MIT general funds, which feeds our funding. In other words, it's jobs wherever. So it ends up being jobs, mostly Europe jobs. However, there's so many Europe possibilities that we do not ask students whether they're eligible for college work study. We don't even know that. A faculty member may ask that of a student because they may feel that the student needs extra help and they will make a special case to us for funding that student. Or maybe there's some special kind of funds floating around that can be used to fund that student. We also get Hughes funding and other funds, especially for minorities and women. And so on, or for sometimes creative work in this area or that area. So we can help out in that way, but we're knee behind, you could say, as far as Europe is concerned. The amount we get from the Institute is only, relatively speaking, although it is $500,000, it, relatively speaking, is a very small amount compared to the whole when you think of what our numbers are overall. Last year, we got about $4.8 million from sponsored research. Faculty who have long since written students into sponsored research grants and paid students from those sources. This also includes a few REU and other sources. But the REUs are so small in number that I'm not even distinguishing. Basically, that's the amount of money, which is now accounting for some 15% of students' financial aid, or the self-help, the amount that they're expected to earn during the year, or which could be loans, financial aid. And our tuition is very high, as you probably know. 4 years at our present tuition plus room and board would just come under $100,000. Yeah. Well, it's just this year squeaking under because it seems better to say $99.99 than to pick. But I guess next year we're going over the top. Next year we're going over the top. The big change is happening now. I suppose I could have put these on overheads when I had a moment, but to give you some idea of how chaotic things have been, these are some headlines from our recent MIT or student newspapers. Europe introduces new funding rules, which is followed about a week later, I think, by students approve of new Europe guidelines. Little did they know exactly what they really were. Followed by this one, the names of 2 students organizing Washington lobbying effort. I'll tell you what that was about in just a minute. They just got back, this lobbying team just got back yesterday. Europe deadline extended. This is the deadline for summer proposals. They're frantically knocking on the doors right now. Fortunately, there's somebody opening the doors and beginning to give them answers back there. Followed by this headline here, $1 million allocated to keep Europe afloat is the operating phrase there. This has been a very hectic spring, followed by, of course, the last line of the story, students welcome new Europe money. Again, not having an idea of what our program, how we're actually giving out funding. But what this is all about is that a dependence on sponsored research is lovely because it means that $4.8 million was funneled to students last year, but it also means that when the federal government rewrites or renegotiates with universities, which some of you are probably well aware of, renegotiates indirect cost recovery, it's a whole new ballgame. And there is something called A21 memorandum, which is going to affect this new fiscal year, July 1st, which changes the rules, and it means overhead needs to apply to Europe salaries, to Europe wages. Never mind that we call them stipends, never mind that this is the same thing that RU, ironically, at the same point is promoting and wants to have the overhead free. These things are not logical, and it's very difficult to explain to students when this is not logical. Employee benefits are also going to be charged on Europe wages. So right now, what we're looking at is a cut, which would be more than half in Europe funding, and a very high price would be put on, let's say, a faculty member paying a freshman out of sponsored research money, because that freshman is going to cost more than twice what that freshman cost before, and that's beyond mere risk-taking. Before, there was a balance. Now I think that's going to be looked at in a very different way. And this is all very much a moving target. By the time I get back tonight, I may hear that something else has yet happened. Because I have to tell you right now, there are experts, financial experts at MIT that I will talk to on Monday and talk to other people who they have just been talking with on Tuesday and find 2 different interpretations of some of these regulations, which has been very exhausting at a time when students are applying for funding. To close with, I just want to say our lobbying effort was extremely successful. These students visited all the important people. They went to our oversight agency, the Office of Naval Research, who immediately called on the phone to somebody at OMB. I don't know whether to impress the students or whether to really make some sort of change, but there was a lot of excitement about their visit down there. There were 3 sterling students who went there. In fact, Heather was one who was invited but couldn't make it because of other commitments. And I think both the idea of seeing students for whom all these policies are really meant to be about was a very exciting thing. How that will be reflected in change and in opening what other people may see as a can of worms, or perhaps making a slight adjustment, because in fact, my personal belief is that Europe was caught in this in a way inadvertently, and perhaps we're a victim of a political climate that didn't lend itself to making exceptions for things. And it is, after all, just a minor several million-dollar problem, not a multi-million-dollar problem in the scheme of things. So on that not altogether cheerful note, I think I'll stop and see if you all don't have more specific questions that I'll be quite happy to answer.
Let me ask just one question. You said that the program doesn't have much structure, at least it doesn't have structure that you want the students to see, but I guess there are a couple of questions in that regard, and that is, what is the staffing of the people, of the operation, the centralized part of the operation? And do you see students, or do the faculty advisors, the coordinators see students?
Okay, everybody sees students actually. We see hordes of them. Our office isn't exactly the most central location. Those of you who've been at MIT know we're in probably the most hideous building on campus. Some of us who have been to MIT have seen this old wooden building, the only wooden building on the MIT campus, a leftover from the radiation lab during World War II. It is really doomed, I hear, the next 4 years it's going to go. In any case, so we're not set in the most optimal place to have students come, and yet they come by the hordes to our office to ask questions and get information. But they go around, wander, and see faculty and see coordinators too. So everybody gets visited by students. I'm sorry, I got so into that. I forgot the first part of your
First
question.
part was, how many people are there to see?
Oh, yes, right, the staff. Well, entertaining all these students who come by is a larger office actually than merely myself and the other Europe people, because we do many things in this outpost in Building 20. Out of our office, our section of the office also runs the Institute Writing Requirement, Institutional Studies, which I have something to do with, and Europe, and a few other miscellaneous minor things. So students come to the office for many things, and everybody helps deal with Europe students. Actual staff is me working, really overseeing this only on a part-time basis, a full-time administrator, a full-time support staff person, and numerous student helpers. That's it. And we're able to do this because all the departments do our accounting for us. We don't get into accounting. We keep our database, oversee a humongous number of accounts, but only oversee. We don't actually do that. We're helped by the Office of Sponsored Programs and by the administrators in each individual department. Otherwise, we couldn't manage these many numbers.
Do you get the minority students to the Office of Minority Education in David Johnson's office, or do you actually do some outreach to those minorities?
We work together, yeah. We don't do it ourselves, or we turn it over completely, but sometimes there's a particular department, let's say, that wants to encourage minority majors and participants in Europe. We'll get together and organize perhaps an event where faculty will talk about their research and invite minority students, and we'll do that together, awarding funds that are particularly directed to minority students. We might work with anybody, somebody from a particular school or department, or OME, or just do it ourselves, all different ways.
Do you think that at nearly that level of student participation, if you don't have funding for the students, we went to a mainly academic partner, do you see that having a severe impact?
Yeah, I do. I think that the numbers for pay would obviously go down a lot. I think faculty will dig into their pockets for some extent. What's happening now, when I see the end of it, will tell me the answer to part of that question. Right now, I see the proposals already down a bit. Credit will go up. How much it will go up, I don't know, because I think the expectations of students will be that they have to spend a certain time. Well, these are our expectations as well. They have to spend a certain amount of time with research. And as I think someone said earlier, if you take a job, that cuts into your research time and additional stress and pressure, and there's not a heck of a lot of free time that MIT students have. And for research, you've got to have chunks of time, entire afternoons, a couple hours at a stretch, not just a bit here and there. So it will be very, very tough. On the other hand, students coming in who don't know what's possible, what was possible, I don't know, maybe a whole new way of looking at things and valuing, and a new currency for research has yet to grow that I really can't foresee now.
We did have that problem in our program when we went from an all-stipend program to this combination work study academic credit. That transition year, we lost a lot of minority students in particular who said, God, my friends all got paid. I'm not going to do this. So it was a really rapid transition.
I just kind of orchestrated something on something of that sort for an honors college student that was taking, for credit research with my chair and was working at the honors college. And so what I did was kind of traded dollars with the honors college, and so I said, okay, I'll give you the balance of what he's got in work study. We'll move his work study over to our department, and this way he can spend all his research time and his work study time in our department doing his research. But that it's kind of neat, doing some creative finance.
Definitely very bad. All right.
Thanks very much. Our next speaker is Ann Rochford, who is the coordinator for Eureka here at Stony Brook.
Most of you have heard enough about Eureka, so I think I will skip over a brief history and describing how the program got started. I will say that the Eureka program is housed in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, which houses a variety of programs designed to serve undergraduate educational needs. We are just one of many. The Eureka program is for academic credit. The central role of the Eureka office is to assist students in finding and identifying faculty who will welcome them in their ongoing projects. We have a philosophy in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, indeed campus-wide, to provide undergraduate research to all students who are seeking to pursue that activity. I do believe that we talked a lot about the sort of conflict between being a research institution and trying to teach and serve undergraduates. I think that a lot can be done, a lot can be said for the fact that we're a research institution. We do have faculty who work on the forefront of their discipline. What we want to do with these projects is to get these students in and to work with these very gifted faculty. We have mechanisms, aside from the Eureka program, there is a mechanism in place in every department for undergraduates to engage in research. What the Eureka program offers is a coherent system for undergraduates to go through this process. And I'm going to just go through the basic 5 key elements that Eureka offers. The first activity that we offer through Eureka is advising. Students will come in for all types of advising to seek undergraduate research. Aside from trying to place these students into labs or ongoing projects, what I've heard from Heather and Elena, something I've actually always taken for granted, but something that is very important that comes with the advisement process, is once a student is placed, they don't really even know the protocol. They don't know should they call the faculty by their first name. They don't understand collegial relationships, something that Heather brought up quite well. So when a student will come into me saying, okay, I'm in a lab, but all I'm doing is data entry, then I will say, well, that's about 80% of the research process. But what I have to get from the student is, are they being involved in the holistic experience of research? Or are they, we've used the example of cleaning bottles. Well, there's also transcribing tapes, data entry. The student needs to be engaged in the whole experience of research. What is the research question? Why is this activity essential to the whole project? So if a student comes in and has a complaint, for example, that all they're doing is data entry, I try to get from them, are they engaged in the whole research question? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. That's another issue. So if they have no experience coming in, so they can't decide if what they're experiencing now, is it normal, is it proper, extra hours, late night hours. And it's not just complaining, it's should I call the person by their first name? And they don't even understand. I have a student who's just been published with their faculty men are working on their second publishable article. They don't have a conception at this point how essential it is for them to be engaged in the publication process. So I'm able to tell them how important for their career this activity is. A second element of Eureka that is offered, and it's very important, is a database of research opportunities. So a student will come in and not really have any idea who they want to work with. They simply know, I've heard about Eureka and I want to be involved. Eureka houses a whole database of research opportunities for undergraduates on campus. So each spring, we survey the entire campus on both sides of the campus, asking faculty, do you have an ongoing project that you would welcome having an undergraduate? Please indicate fall, spring, year-round, whatever, and any kind of requirements you have, any sort of coursework that you have, a GPA requirement. By and large, there's not a GPA requirement, but sometimes there's some coursework experience. So a student can come into the office indicate, well, I'm a pre-medical student, or I'd like to go to graduate school in English. So I can provide them the right database or point them in the right direction with this group of faculty I've indicated, and they seem to be right in your alley. Okay, you're a pre-medical student, but this person in the psychology department is right up your alley, so I think you might want to talk to this person. So that even though there's a disparity in departments, I could still match up research interests. Funding, a very important part of the Eureka program. Some of you actually met Jim Simons last night. Jim Simons has been one of the key elements to the Eureka program. Through his generous support, we are able to offer a supply and expenses allowance for the fall and spring semester. So students who need travel money, faculty who may at one time have been reluctant to take a student in the lab, we can say, well, here's the $150 to buy chemicals or supplies that the student needs to offer them that experience. Also, in addition to a supplies and expenses allowance that we offer in the fall and in the spring regular academic year, we also offer through Eureka a summer research fellowship award. This award is offered to anywhere from about 7 to 15 students each each summer. Now the fellowship award is about $1,000 or anywhere up to $1,000. So they can use this money to either continue their existing project, continue working in the lab without the burden of having a job or going back home and commuting back and forth, or they can use that money to travel to on-site projects. For example, we had a student in the Eureka program last summer to travel to Madagascar with the renowned anthropologist Patricia Wright and engage in an original project which will be published this year. He's been there actually several times. He's won the award several times. And we're looking forward to sending some students, for example, to Israel to engage in an archaeological dig this summer. The Eureka funding has actually just been a real core element to the program up to this point and has offered many students opportunities that they would not have had without the funding element.
And where does the funding come from?
I'm sorry?
Where does your money come from?
Where does the money
Where does the
come
money
from?
come from?
As I said, you might have met Jim Simons last night. A lot of the funding
It's
for
all
these
campus
students.
funds?
No, it's a private donation.
Oh, it's the Mantle Foundation.
Yes, who was introduced to you last night. Also, the Office of Undergraduate Studies sponsors a lot of the programmatic activities. The distribution of information, contact with the faculty is all housed in the Office of Undergraduate Studies, and they do handle a lot of the programmatic activities. The fourth element that separates Eureka really from a departmental undergraduate research experience is the annual research symposium that is held each spring. The annual research symposium offers the Eureka students the opportunity to present their research to the academic community. This experience, I believe, is one of the core elements for the simple reason that a student may be engaged in a research project for a year, 2 years, one semester, but the ability to take this research and condense it into a 15-minute talk requires that the student be very focused about the research question. So in order to even apply to present your research, the student has to prepare a polished abstract to be compiled as part of the program. They also must prepare a very focused 10 to 15-minute talk and be prepared for any on-the-spot questions that they may have. We just had our symposium last month, and about 20 students presented, and the research was excellent. The level and the quality of the students was superb. The fifth element that is new to the program this year is something that I do believe that does belong with the Eureka program, and that is the actual documentation of the campus-wide research going on with undergraduates. The first part of that is an annual report on undergraduate research. That would consist of original raw data that would come from the registrar, who's registered for undergraduate research in their various departments and within the Eureka program. So from that, I've been able to gather some demographic data, which I'll share with you in just a minute. So I'll be presenting that all of this information, demographics, cumulative GPA, which departments are the most active, which majors are the most active in engaging their students in undergraduate research. I'll be presenting that to the Vice Provost in the coming weeks. Also, a compilation of research abstracts. We had close to 1,100 students engaged in undergraduate research on campus this academic year. What I believe the Eureka program should be striving for is a documentation of this undergraduate research. So what we did this year to solicit these students to give us their abstracts was to create the Eureka Research Awards for each academic division. This effort yielded 80-some research abstracts, which will be compiled and ready for publication in the coming weeks also. Why is this compilation important? I think for several reasons. One of the reasons that we want to compile this sort of activity going on with undergraduates is a recruitment activity. We want to be able to reach these targeted populations, these high-achieving students, and bring them into Stony Brook. One way to do that is to demonstrate the level of work these undergraduates are doing. Also, we talked briefly last night in particular, but I'd like to come back to this issue about the reward structure for the faculty who do take undergraduates. I think that a compilation of research abstracts, which does identify a faculty mentor who assists these students, is a nice publication for the faculty mentor. It's a recognition of the faculty mentor. I think it should also be considered as part of the reward structure in career building for the faculty mentor. So if we can get the person publicized and identified and recognized among his or her peers, I think that's a way that we can encourage faculty to take more students. Some of the logistical elements that we've talked about, we've shared, is what we handle with Eureka logistically. When a student comes in and they've decided that, okay, I've identified a faculty person to work with, what Eureka really steps in and does in brokering that relationship is give the student what's called an agreement form, a Eureka agreement form. The student and the faculty member will fill out the Eureka agreement form together as a mutual contract. The agreement form consists of a project description. What are you working on? What's the research question? Secondly, what's the hourly and daily commitment? Third, what is the academic commitment above and beyond the research activity? Why is this important? We just had a discussion about some of the conflicts that may occur. The agreement form acts as, again, as I said, a contract. So if there is ever a dispute of what is going on in the lab, you simply can refer back to a Eureka contract. Also, we have midterm assessment forms that are sent out to the faculty member and the student in the midterm. So a student will be able to tell me, what am I doing? How far do I think I've progressed? I'm only doing data entry, or wow, I'm just about to be published. The faculty member in turn gives his or her assessment of the student. So by the time I send out the final assessment form soliciting a grade, I can be able to troubleshoot any problems in the midterm if there is any, or to encourage the student, if need be, to increase that grade. Before I talk about where we want to go with Eureka, I'd like to just talk briefly about the kind of undergraduates who are engaged in research at Stony Brook now. In trying to assess a program or assess where we'd like to go with Eureka or undergraduate research campus-wide, all over campus, so I'd like to first start by identifying who the present students are. Table 1 is describing the race and ethnicity. We briefly talked about trying to reach out to women, minorities, and engage them in the research process as well. I believe at Stony Brook we've accomplished that. Everyone can see that. As one might expect, about 50% of white students are engaged in research. All of these numbers mirror the undergraduate population at Stony Brook, so I feel that we've fulfilled our goal in reaching out to all student groups. Now, let me just briefly say, these are the kind of data that I will be supplying in the report on undergraduate research in the Briefly, if I was to do a cross-tabular analysis, I suspect I would find that these groups would be in traditional disciplines. That is, we may not find as many African American students in physics or engineering as we might like to see. So further analysis would reveal that maybe some work still has to be done, although the numbers might seem like we might be satisfied, we might want to stop. I think that further analysis will reveal that cultural and social barriers might be blocking students from particular disciplines. Another issue that's been coming up is early identification of these students. Obviously, most of these students are engaged in research when they're seniors. The reason that I can immediately discuss that 75% are seniors is that many of the disciplines on campus require a senior project or some research experience by the time a student graduates. I might also point out that the frequencies is somewhat low because this is only fall data. I was not able to obtain data for the entire academic year, but we can certainly draw inferences from the proportions. Okay. I think in observing this table that early identification of freshmen and sophomore is in order to really be able to get a full research experience for our undergraduates at Stony Brook. Finally, again, these percentages approximate the student body at Stony Brook. Once again, if I was to do a cross-tabular analysis, I might be not surprised at where these students are. I do know there's a huge percentage of students engaged in undergraduate research in the psychology department. We might find females overrepresented in the psychology department versus other areas where we would like to see doors opened up to them, chemistry, physics, engineering, etc. So further analysis will probably reveal that a lot more work is in order, and we might want to start at the freshman, sophomore level. I want to add that I said that approximately 1,100 students are enrolled in undergraduate research at Stony Brook this academic year. That wouldn't count students who are volunteering to work in the lab. That doesn't bring into question the Honors College program, which, as an integral part of their program, engages undergraduates in research. Also, I would like to point out the mean GPA for the students enrolled in undergraduate research is a 3.0, with a standard deviation of 0.6. So we're talking about 68% of the students fall between a 2.4 and a 3.6 average. Just looking at the tables and some of my observations as the Eureka coordinator at Stony Brook, something I'd actually like to bring to the table as a point of discussion is that by and large, the students who come to see me are pre-med students. I see some smiles. It's really something that I would, first of all, I would like to be able to accommodate them. Now, the Health Sciences Center has taken a lot of Eureka students and have opened up their doors to our students. On the other hand, there is no way that we could reach the demand for the pre-medical students. About 20% of our students enrolled in undergraduate research are biology or biochemistry majors. What I would like to do is open up the door to the humanities and the social behavioral sciences. That is something that we look forward to doing in the coming year. Looking ahead, as I said, I would like to open the door to humanities and social behavioral sciences, increase the diversity that the Eureka program offers. I'd also like to increase the total enrollment of undergraduates engaged in research. Right now it might be running about 15%. I'd like to see that go to about 25 or 30%. What we're looking to do is to establish programmatic relationships with other undergraduate research programs, like the Honors College, for example, like the summer research programs, which bring undergraduates from other campuses, REU program. If we could bring these programs together for one coherent undergraduate research program. With our database, I'd like to make that computerized. So the plan in our office is eventually to make a computer-based program, which a terminal might sit in the library. Students can walk right up to it, skip the booklet and go right to a terminal. A user-friendly system, much like we have in looking up regular books in the library. In closing, I want to just mention briefly a situation that happened a couple of weeks ago when I took the students to the National Conference on Undergraduate Research. I had a student who was a chemistry major who was attending a talk on sociology with me. Now, she really didn't understand a lot of the data that was being discussed or the analysis, but she did mention to me, okay, Dr. Rochford, I didn't really understand what they were talking about, but I was able to follow the research method. I think the thing that I came away with more than anything was that even though we might come from different departments and different disciplines, if we can impart to our students the research method, the scientific method, I think that we'll have a generalizable program that can offer something to all students from all backgrounds.
How would you characterize faculty subscription or response to the questionnaire you send out every year?
Oh, the Eureka Opportunity Survey?
Yeah.
I actually, at this point, I can't speak to that because I've only been there since September. I will say I find it strong, but like most survey research, the numbers are small. Relative to the faculty members we do have on campus, somewhat small, and it's not enough to service the need, but I do think that if we could open up the doors to other departments like anthropology, any of the humanities and social sciences, I think it will even out. We'll be able to accommodate the students.
Okay, when you say you have 1,100 students participating, do they all participate centrally through your office, or are many of those students doing independent study type research and just are enrolled in the course that is designated for that type of function?
We have about 70 students in the Eureka program. About 1,100 campus-wide are engaged in their own departmental research courses.
Where did you get that number, 1,100?
I went straight to the registrar's office for the raw data, and then I compiled the tables that you saw today. So 1,100 students are registered this academic year.
Let me just add something to your 1,100 and the 70 number. Unless things have changed, because I haven't asked this question of you, a large number of the students that end up doing departmental research go through the Eureka office. In other words, you talk to the students, you advise the students, and tell them register for psychology research, register for chemistry research, or whatever. In other words, that's the match that occurs. Eureka, in fact, is often used mainly for the departments which are not active in research.
That's right. A lot of the students who do come to the office do not even know about a departmental research course. But it's certainly there in the bulletins, but I don't think they recognize it for what it is.
And I was just going to comment on the point made regarding automating your database. It seems to me that in that development you might be able to make it easy for faculty members to download their own opportunities onto the system so that you're constantly keeping it up to date and expanding. It's just a thought in terms of your own.
Yeah, it could be done if they sent it through all in one.
Well, I mean, there are ways that it can be done, and that might be an exciting way. Faculty oftentimes, and I speak as a faculty member now and as an ex-administrator, faculty oftentimes are reticent to take the time to fill out forms and all of that. And so anything that can make it easier. I
It's
think-
true,
Speed up the
even,
process.
yes, even to give them a return envelope to make sure I get something back, that's something that, and yeah, I think that's true. Also, when we send out a survey in the spring, by the following spring, they're calling me, take me off that list. I've taken all the students, so a database will be able to be upkept on a consistent basis.
I think it probably would be useful to know that the 1,100 figure is a figure for students who are actually registered for courses. There are many other students who volunteer. There are students who are engaged in research for pay. And one of the things that we will do in the future is to track the whole of the activity. And we do have Eureka coordinators in the various departments, and part of what they will do is to assist us in that regard. The user-friendly component of the database that Ann mentioned is extremely important, such that it's a current database. Presently on campus, we have a fairly complex, large, historical faculty research database that I don't remember Bob Snyder's title presently, but it's a magnificent resource with regards to funded research of faculty and interests they've had, publications, etc. But the user-friendly component is that we would like to have the terminals unmanned, one in the reference room in the library on East Campus and one on West Campus. And when the student goes to the terminal to search for a faculty member or a subject that they might wish to explore, we want to be confident that it's current as opposed to historical. And to give some sense of magnitude with regards to students that are advised via Eureka, on average it runs between 400 and 500 students per semester that will come to the Office of Undergraduate Studies for advisement, even though they actually will take a research course under the departmental designated.
When you say research course, is that independent study or is that an actual course where you're learning research methods in that discipline?
Well, they actually occur in both forms. There is a generic departmental designated for research, and a student may in fact work individually on a project, may work on a team, or in some instances a faculty member may have a collection of students. There are specific methods courses, and the 478 designated is not a methods course per se, but departments may and have in fact needed for that purpose.
And there are separate listings for independent study. It's not independent study.
I think while the establishment and the expansion of the database for the pre-established research opportunities is of course important, if you really want to increase the number from the so-called underrepresented departments, if I could use that term, I think you have to also focus on the opportunity for student-initiated and design activity. Let me give you an example. The type of activity that Lena Miller-Reeser presented, we heard that started the type of thing where a student came and it changed 2 or 3 times and had faculty work with it. That's not something that could have been generated from a database as something that was ready and there and available. And I think the social and behavioral sciences and arts and humanities tend to lend themselves more to that sort of thing of someone coming to a faculty member, and students sit and talk and you work something out and you create something.
That's a good point. That's one of the things I decided to leave aside for schedule's sake. But one of the things that the office will be doing is bringing in Eureka coordinators for each academic department. So a student could come to a departmental coordinator and say, well, I have a germ of an idea, and let me bounce it off of you. And he or she, as the Eureka coordinator, could say, oh, go see so-and-so, I know he or she is working on that project or something very similar and could give you all the literature you want right now. And I think that would certainly, I know I can't advise physics or engineering students, but to a certain degree, but inside the departments is where ideas like that could be generated.
By the same token, advisors for undergraduates, when they come talk about their schedule, might plant the seed to alert students that this is a possibility, that they can keep independent study in the department they're choosing. You may not be aware that that's even an option, even though it's in the bulletin.
Yeah, that's true, but I think that's why one of the things I would want to discuss is the reward structure for faculty who do take students. We try to offer as much recognition as possible with a compilation of research abstracts which identify the faculty member or certificates of recognition, but unless that really counts towards career building and a career expansion, we might still always be held to a 15% undergraduate population engaged in research.
I just have to emphasize what she said about sort of using computers, because I know, I'm not quite sure why pharmacology is so popular, but we get, dozens of people all the time sort of inquiring about this, and we use email as a source, kind of how faculty, gets everybody, and we say, we've got a student, she's got this kind of background, she's, from this university, so on and so forth. Do you have a space in your area, for pay or not for pay, depending on what the student's interest is. And, a faculty member will respond, say, yeah, I'm interested in having someone come in and have some hands-on on my research. This person is doing something in DNA or whatever it is. And it's very useful, and it doesn't waste, it doesn't take a lot of time. And I know for a fact that with faculty, the shorter the message, the happier they are. So, we try to compact the information, kind of name, what they're interested in, for pay or not for pay, please call me and let me know. And,
so you
and
think
it works.
an interactive system,
Excuse
where
me?
the student would, an interactive system, you think would be,
I'm talking about email, using the
Yeah.
computer system. We live by it in School of Medicine. I mean, we do everything via email, including our grants. So, we're sort of very high-tech type of place, and then that's the vehicle we use to make those kinds of announcements, so that the faculty member doesn't spend a lot of time. He logs in, he's got 10 messages. One of those messages is from me saying, I've got a student, please call me and let me know if you've got a spot. So,
well, I think one of the strengths of the arrangement that the RECA program has now is that the student will go themselves to a faculty mentor and negotiate that arrangement themselves with the faculty mentor. That in itself is an experience that will be useful to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see a system in place, but I wouldn't want to engage in the actual placement of them, of the students. I think it's important for the faculty to weed out who they would like to work with, but also the student to negotiate a situation that will work for them as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, our last person on this before approaches is Bonnie O, Assistant Dean for Undergraduate Studies at the University of Maryland.
Actually, do you still want me to talk? I have only 5 minutes left.
No, go ahead. This is clearly the part that people are interested in. So.
Okay. Being the last person in the whole series of presentation, I wish I had the words of wisdom, but I don't. Actually, our system is a toddler compared to full-grown adult like MIT. So, a troublesome 6-year-old. So, and Stony Brook seemed like much well-to-do toddler than our program. Ours, as compared to everybody else, it seemed like a rather scrawny, undernourished toddler, which we need lots of nutrition in a hurry, and lots of it. And I'm kind of optimistic in the sense that right now we are going, our undergraduate studies office is going through a really massive reorganization. I noted that Dr. Douglas is a vice provost for undergraduate studies. We are right in the midst of search for associate vice provost for academic affairs and the dean for undergraduate studies, which is a considerably elevated position than just administrative dean for undergraduate studies, which had been the case as long as the Office of Undergraduate Studies existed. So I'm hopeful that when this new person, when my super boss takes office, he or she will see that this is a very important part of the undergraduate education and give it a real big dose of nutrition. On the way here, I just heard something, a joke. I don't know whether this will fly or not, but let me try it. I think higher education is disengaging from NATO. You don't get it. No action, talk only. In other words, I think we are trying to stop engaging in education by lecture only and getting into some actions, and including undergraduate education, undergraduate students to interact with the faculty members. And as we heard last night from Dr. Charles Glassick, that undergraduate research is one of that action, and I'm very happy to be here and participating in this very enlightening conference on undergraduate research. And I'm also happy that in a very small way, Maryland can participate in it because we have started this program about a year and a half ago. I want to put College Park's undergraduate research program in the context of recent development for undergraduate education on our campus. To sum up, undergraduate research assistant program, we call it URAD instead of UROP or Eureka. And there is a reason for it, and I can explain that by briefly walking you through our recent developments and history of undergraduate education enhancement program. URAP is simply one of the last of a series of enhancement programs for undergraduate education at the University of Maryland at College Park. The enhancement programs, and we don't use that enhancement word enhancement anymore because in the beginning we heard so much. But now, since the draconian budget cut that took place, it sort of became a joke. So everybody kind of laughs and sneers whenever we say even the word enhancement. Anyway, the enhancement program began in 1988 when the statewide higher education reform took place at Maryland. And College Park was designated as the flagship campus, a de jure recognition of de facto situation. The campus was supposed to receive considerable additional funding and elevated status, and the main component of this enhancement program was supposed to be undergraduate education, which included revamping of the honors program, the establishment of the core program, creation of the Division of Letters and Sciences, which became the home of undecided freshman class. The allocation for these had taken place in 1988 and 1989, and these were all implemented by the year 1990. But ironically, by that year, we experienced draconian budget cuts. And with the implementation of the above mentioned programs, the undergraduate studies was requesting a lot of faculty members. Faculty volunteers were asked to do this and that, and it would have been all right if the enhancement program was continuing to be richly funded and moving ahead, but we were hit with this budget cut, and we were hearing a lot of complaints, or at least kind of rather reluctant volunteers rather than willing and happy volunteers. So in this atmosphere, we were hard-pressed to devise means to assist faculty as well as promote undergraduate education. Out of many brainstorming sessions emerged two programs: UTA, Undergraduate Teaching Assistants, and URAP, Undergraduate Research Assistant Program. The idea is to give something back to the faculty as well as help undergraduate students and promote undergraduate education. URAP is therefore initially a program designed to assist faculty in their research at an economically hard-pressed time. Undergraduate research is really nothing new at U.S. institutions of higher education. I recall when I attended college in late 50s and early 60s doing some research for faculty members, and although I got nothing tangible out of it, as a foreign student, I thought this was a wonderful thing, and I never expected anything in return, no money, credit, not even a pat on the back from the faculty members. And I just willingly did it, and obviously these were kind of preliminary research I did as a historian. I went to the library and compiled bibliography. Sometimes I read an article and translated the foreign language materials for faculty members and things like that. And when I recall, as I was coordinating this program, that is in fact undergraduate research program. And that something like that I include in my letters to the faculty members when I'm soliciting their participation. You don't have to engage in a very in-depth research. If you have some exploration program, you can use undergraduate students. A lot changed since that time, and American higher education became much more complex. Now undergraduate research is increasingly becoming systematized and has become an important organized part of undergraduate education. In some ways, it is bridging the gap between faculty and students and bringing them together, as we heard so many times today. As more emphasis is placed on undergraduate education and education beyond classroom, teaching on the part of the faculty members, it is becoming increasingly more important, and more emphasis is placed on research by undergraduate students outside classroom. And as pointed out again by last night, who also quoted Alexander Aston, it's very important to involve students, and I believe no other program involves students and contributes to retention as the undergraduate research program. We have at Maryland, obviously every faculty has some kind of independent research program, and every department has a program, and if we include all of that, it will run into thousands. But as I surveyed undergraduate research program at College Park, 5 programs stood out, and I brought some write-ups on it, and if you're interested, I can share some with you. And as you look at top 4 programs, you can understand why we also thought about undergraduate research assistant program. We have at Maryland at least 5 distinct undergraduate research programs. One is a senior summer scholarship program, which is known as SSS, operated out of Undergraduate Studies Office. Howard Hughes Medical Institute Research Program out of the College of Life Sciences. summer undergraduate research program out of the graduate school, and Ronald E. McNair post-baccalaureate achievement program, also out of undergraduate office, and finally undergraduate research assistant program, also out of undergraduate studies office. So 3 out of 5 of these programs are from the undergraduate studies office. And some of you might have noticed that I was really nodding my head when Sandy Gregerman was talking about how what she was describing, University of Michigan is so similar to ours. Our total student population is close to 35,000. I'm not sure exactly whether it is at 35,000 or 32,000 because when enhancement program began, we were supposed to reduce the number of undergraduate student population to enhance the quality. But with the budget cut, we could not do that. I mean, we could not meet the budget with that. So it was kind of fluctuating between 32,000 and 35,000. Out of that, about 27 or 28,000 are undergraduate students and the rest are graduate students. And another characteristic so similar to University of Michigan is that we are a very decentralized university. Each dean, there are 14 deans, each dean is like a feudal lord in a feudal satrapy. And really you do not dare infiltrate their domain unless it comes from the provost or the president. And undergraduate, as a coordinator or director of undergraduate research program, I find it very difficult to coordinate scattered programs across the campus, to bring it under my jurisdiction, and then you immediately hear how she's an empire builder. And what's she trying to do, all this kind of thing. So you really, it's a very slow process, and it's a very difficult project. But as I said, I hope the new associate provost, whom I understand we're looking for a person who can walk on the water and fly at the same time. So I hope we can play some magic and bring, for instance, undergraduate research program like thing in one of the more centrally coordinated way. And besides this, URAP is only one of 6 programs I run. And also I am engaged and called upon to do a lot of minority-related things, especially Asian American minority-related projects. Because although 15% of our student population is of Asian origin, there's absolutely nobody to coordinate anything for them. And so I out of undergraduate studies office, in the function role as an assistant dean, I mean, I'm probably one of the most visible Asian Americans on the campus and one of only 2 top administrators. So a lot of things come to me, and there's no way for me to turn that away. So when I say 6 programs, that doesn't include any of the Asian American advocacy roles that I play. So unfortunately, URAP cannot get all of my attention as much as I want to, and I know the potential for this. I know that this is a very important part. It has a tremendous future for it if there are more resources put into it, and if I can allocate a little bit more of my time or my secretaries or my half-time graduate assistant's time to it, but I simply have not been able to. But so you heard a little bit about how it began, and but it also began because unlike the first 5 I listed here, it is not merit-based, and we deliberately made the students' qualifications not restricted, and the faculty also rules not very stringent. So all the students who are in good academic standing can participate, And also, unlike the other 4, it's not restricted to upper class people. The freshmen and sophomores can start. So it is, in that sense, it's somewhat similar to University of Michigan program. One thing that our program doesn't have that all of the others seem to have is that we neither grant credits nor give any money. At the moment, what we are doing is give transcript notation on the transcript, and we have been able to talk the registrar's office into making it somewhat noticeable so that the transcript will stand out, and this is in return for students engaging in undergraduate research with a faculty member anywhere from 4 to 6 hours a week. And students can do it either one term or a whole year. We have compiled faculty research directory program directory, some like the one that Anne is talking about. And unfortunately, this is only approaching the end of the year, and we updated in the summer. So I noticed that this was absolutely the last copy we made in the office. So we brought this, and if you're interested, you can pass it around and take a look at it. And let's see. And our procedures are very simple. For faculty members, they fill out a faculty directory listing and send it to the undergraduate studies office, and choose a student or students when they come calling on for them, or when they contact them to discuss the terms of the undergraduate research assistant program, and fill out faculty student research agreement form, which is this form, and it's a 3-part thing. And I would like feedback on this, by the way. If you can think of anything and make it simpler, the better. If I missed any vital information, I would like some feedback from you. And at the end of the term, faculty members are supposed to sign their copy of the agreement form and also mention their approval of the students' work and of the transcript notations for the students, and sent to our office. For students, they are urged to attend a URAC workshop, which is held in the beginning of a term. Usually we like to arrange it within the second week of a semester, or come by the undergraduate studies office and fill out a student research resume. And this is a student research resume form. And then look through the faculty research directory, which we bring to the workshop. Sometimes we divide it by the college and make the copies available for students, to locate a faculty member with the research projects of interest for them, and call or visit the faculty member to discuss research projects and the terms of the research assistant program. And then if they are accepted, come to an agreement with the faculty member regarding hours and expectations, and fill out the faculty student research agreement form, and submit one copy of the form along with one copy of their resume to the undergraduate studies office, and faculty and student each retain a copy of the 3-part forms. And then they are, of course, expected to complete the assigned tasks to receive transcript notation indicating successful completion of research in the field of their research. Anyway, that's the summary of the program, and the goals are incorporated into my presentation, but it's all mentioned already, so I'll skip that we are running out of time too. Just briefly conclude with some numbers. Since its inception in the fall of 1992, a total of 124 students participated in the program, but we have more faculty members listed in the faculty directory. In the directory, we have 166 faculty members listed. Since some faculty members have more than one student working for them, for instance, according to my list of a mid-semester list of this semester, I noted that one faculty member in College of Life Science has 7 students, and there are a couple of faculty members who have a couple of them. So since some faculty members have more than one student working for them, only about half of the listed faculty have had the URAP students. But from the large number of workshop attendance, it's clear that our students are very interested. But many of our students come from families of modest income and have to work 10 to 20 hours a week. A recent quick hands-up survey clearly showed that if we could provide funds to replace the students' minimum wage, more students will be able to participate in the URAP program. URAP will stay, and I have no doubt that it will only grow since a close faculty-student relationship and faculty mentoring are considered to be one of the best means for increasing students' retention rate. Many sectors of the campus are now looking at URAP with greater interest, and URAP became now somewhat better known than 2 years ago. And it has become known in 2 short times, and receiving more and more phone calls. And we cannot field all the phone calls either. Recently, even the student affairs people have asked, and when they formed a task force on the senior year, they included our program, and they have written the funding proposal for their task force. And other plans for outside funding is also underway. And although URAP is still a toddler, I'm confident that it will grow and mature nicely to be an integral undergraduate experience at College Park, well beyond the time that I will still be at College Park. In 2 short years, the very modest program has already met our modest goals, and I have a feeling, and I believe strongly that it has now reached the time to move ahead with much more funding and more concrete plans to recruit and publicize and increase the number of student participation. Our brochure is monocolor and very modest. I put out some, but I brought some extra copies, so sure.
Are there any questions? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break then, and we'll come back